So there I was standing on my porch watching an HOA officer yank out a taser and fired at my wife, yeah, my actual wife. What they did not know, she is Special Forces and her old unit, they were already watching with laser sights on the idiot's chest. Now before you start asking, wait, what, how do you even pull that off legally, and how does she not notice, let me tell you. In this neighborhood, legality is more of a suggestion. And my wife noticing, oh, she noticed. She just let it play out because Lena does not flinch at power tripping home all cops with tactical fantasies. Me, I flinched. I was holding a coffee cup still in my slippers when the spark flew and she dropped like a sack of brick. My brain could not even process it all at once. 1 second we are arguing about whether we had enough charcoal for the weekend barbecue, and the next she is sprawled on the driveway and some guy in a knockoff sheriff vest is shouting into a walkie-talkie like he is breaching Fallujah. Let's rewind a bit. We moved into Greenbrier Estates about 6 months ago. The flyer said peaceful, secure, family-oriented, which I now understand translates to governed by a tyrannical HOA with delusions of militarization. The houses are identical, the grass is policed more harshly than the sidewalks, and God forbid you put out your trash bin before 7:01 a.m. Lena thought the place was hilarious from day one. She cracked jokes about the HOA rules being longer than her old deployment handbook, but she went along with it because, you know, peace and quiet, decent schools nearby, and no neighbors who blast EDM at 2 a.m. The first strike was the Jeep, her beautiful matte black Militara Jeep she parked at 2 inches over the driveway line, barely kissing the grass, and the next day, a violation notice appeared with the urgency of a nuclear code alert. I laugh. Lena did not. She quietly took the notice, scanned it, and filed it in a folder labeled Greenbrier Absurdities. I should have known then she was already planning something. The HLA president, a woman named Carrie, yes, that is her real name, and no, she does not see the irony, ran the neighborhood like a discount dictator. Her laminated clipboard was her scepter. Pastel sweaters like armor, and she hated Lena from the moment she laid eyes on her. Said she gave off aggressive energy and male-coded intimidation. I think she was just mad. Lena did not flinch when she walked over unannounced to explain how community harmony begins with visual cohesion. Lena blinked once, said cool story, and went back to tuning the Jeep suspension. That was apparently all it took to earn us a weekly inspection and 3 separate citations about combat vehicles disturbing neighborhood tranquility. But the real turning point came when the HOA formed what they called the Greenbrier Civil Enforcement Division. Sounds fancy, right? Do not be fooled. It was 5 guys who all looked like they got rejected from TSA training, dressed in black polos and camo pants, wearing fake badge patches with phrases like Code Enforcer and Safety Lead. They carried flashlights the size of baseball bats, clipboards, and no joke, pepper spray. I saw one of them practicing baton moves in the cul-de-sac like he was auditioning for some HOA remake of SWAT. Lena watched them with a calm disinterest of someone who'd once talked down a cartel leader with nothing but a wristwatch and a translator. She said nothing, but she started taking longer walks, started asking quiet questions to neighbors, started running cables through the attic. I asked her once if she was planning something. She smiled and said, just watching. They are not ready yet. I did not press. I have learned that when Lena says she is watching, you let her watch. Meanwhile, the HOA's little army got bolder. They put up cameras on stop signs. They threatened to ticket kids for sidewalk chalk. They fined someone's grandmother for having visibly rebellious garden gnomes. No, I am not making that up. One gnome was flipping the bird. They treated it like a hate crime. And then one day I caught one of the officers looking in our windows while pretending to check the air quality meter. Lena did not yell. She did not scream. She just asked him if he would like to test how his pepper spray holds up against a woman who has been tear gassed 3 times before breakfast. He left fast. That led to the barbecue, our casual backyard July 4th thing that was really more of a neighborhood therapy session disguised as burgers and lawn chairs. People were fed up. Home meetings had turned into theatrical productions. Karen would bang her gavel and shout things like, "This is a civilized community," while another homeowner in the back would mutter, "Then stop patrolling like the Gestapo." We hosted the cookout. Lena parked her Jeep right at the curb in full view of the HOA sign, and sure enough, the enforcement team showed up like clockwork. This time they had matching vests and printed citation books. I was flipping burgers when I saw them form up like they We're breaching a bunker, 5 guys, tactical gear, clipboards, and one holding a body cam while narrating we are about to engage the target vehicle. Lena just stood in front of the Jeep, arms crossed, did not say a word. They gave her a warning. She shrugged, said you are welcome to try. And apparently they took that as a green light. Which brings us back to the moment the taser fired. Lena dropped, I froze, and then one by one red laser dots flicked on, glowing against vests, arms, necks like silent judgment beams from the universe itself. That is when the officer holding the taser stopped smiling. He blinked hard. From inside the hedges, the side alley, the roof of our garage, Lena's former team stepped into the open. I did not even hear them arrive, but they were their calm professional arm, and Lena, she opened one, eyes smirked, and said, I always wondered what it would feel like to get stunned by an amateur. What none of us knew yet was that she had been documenting every single thing for months. And the real storm, it was just about to hit. The funny thing about a power-hungry HOA is that they never think they are the villain. They genuinely believe they're heroes in a suburban war zone, holding the line between peace and anarchy, as if someone grilling chicken too close to a fence will cause the entire neighborhood to combust. After the taser incident, which, let me remind you, ended with Lena opening one eye like a mildly annoyed cat, things should have ended. You would think the HOA would take a long, sobering breath and reconsider their life choices after realizing they just assaulted a decorated special forces vet in front of half the neighborhood. But no, that would require shame, and people like Carrie Withers, our beloved HOA president, do not do shame. They doubled down. Carrie, yes, that is still her real name, and yes, she still wears her pastel sweater sets like a uniform. Decided that Lena was the problem. Not the unauthorized taser deployment, not the fact that her fake cop squad had been caught on multiple doorbell cameras doing shady late-night inspections. Nope, it was Lena. Lena was disruptive. Lena was a threat to community cohesion. Lena, she claimed, was creating a hostile energy signature. I swear she used those words like she had just come back from a yoga retreat and was weaponizing the language of wellness like a club. So what did Carrie do? She called an emergency HOA board meeting, not to apologize, not to investigate the incident, but to introduce a new policy, a restriction against military-style vehicles and aggressive displays of force on residential property. That is right, a direct hit at Lena and her Jeep, the same Jeep that had been parked peacefully in our own driveway since we moved in. The language was vague enough to sound official, but specific enough to make Lena the unspoken target. And as if that was not enough of a power move, she had the gall to rename her little group of clipboard-wielding mall cop rejects. The Greenbrier Civil Enforcement Division was now officially operating as a neighborhood stabilization task force. Lena laughed for a full 10 seconds when she read the notice on our door. Then she folded it neatly and added it to her growing binder. She had a whole tab system now. Violations, false citations, invasions of privacy, and my personal favorite, ridiculous phrases. That one included gems like unauthorized lawn gnome and non-compliant wind chime frequency. But again, Lena did not raise her voice. She did not charge into the next board meeting with fists or fury. Instead, she quietly took a longer jog the next morning. That is when I started to notice she was not just jogging anymore. She was scouting. What no one realized was that Lena had already turned our under the stairs storage room into a miniature war room. No weapons, no drama, just intel. Folders, printed documents, flash drives, timestamps, and footage from doorbell cams all over the neighborhood. Half of them were not even ours. Turns out other neighbors had been sending her stuff. Lena had become the unofficial confidant of Greenbrier Estates. One guy across the street, Jim, retired soft-spoken classic car collector, had been fined for improper tarp tension. Another woman, single mother of 2, was cited because her dog's collar was too reflective under LED streetlights. Everyone had a story. Everyone had been picked on. They just did not know what to do about it until Lena started quietly compiling their stories into something more than just neighborhood gossip. And her old team, oh, they were definitely involved now. Nothing formal, nothing aggressive, just situational awareness, as Lena put it. One of them, Alex, lived only a few blocks away and started walking his dog past our house 3 times a day. Another, Javi, worked at a security firm downtown and just happened to install a few discreet cameras on behalf of a client concerned about porch pirates. It was not surveillance. It was insurance, and it was not illegal. Not when the cameras were pointed at public spaces or placed on property with permission. Meanwhile, the HOA task force kept escalating. They began showing up at random unannounced. They carried citation pads like bouncers, guarding an invisible nightclub. They took pictures of trash bins, measured lawn heights with tape measures, and started leaving cryptic notes like "this porch light may exceed lumen limits." At one point, I swear they used a drone to hover over someone's backyard for aerial compliance checks. Lena flagged that footage and added it to the binder over each aerial. She was building a case. Did not know the end game, yet I could feel it coming. Karen, of course, believed she was winning. She strutted around the neighborhood with her nose slightly upturned like a monarch surveying her empire. She would nod at residents like she expected applause for maintaining order. But behind those forced smiles and carefully clipped hedges, people were simmering. Every block had its own little powder keg waiting to ignite, and Lena was just standing nearby with a match, watching patiently. Then came the incident with the sidewalk chalk. A group of kids, sweet, harmless, barely out of kindergarten, had decorated the sidewalk near the community park with chalk drawings. Rainbows, dinosaurs, some kind of lopsided unicorn that looked like it was in witness protection. The kind of stuff that makes you smile. Karenette did not smile. She called it defacement of common areas and issued a $100 fine to each household whose kid had participated. She even got the task force involved to photograph the evidence before the next rainstorm washed it away. That was the moment several parents snapped. They showed up at the next HOA meeting, normally a dry affair with barely 5 people in attendance, and packed the room. Lena was there too, sitting quietly in the back with her folder. She did not speak. She did not need to. The others were doing it for her now. They shouted, they demanded answers. And for once they did not back down when Karenette banged her gavel like a judge trying to stop a courtroom riot. After the meeting, Karenette stormed out. The next morning, we woke up to find a new notice taped to our door. Final warning: vehicle in violation of subsection 7.3.1b, presence of warlike aesthetic. Lena smiled without showing her teeth. She did not even look up from her laptop. I asked her what she was working on. She said a small report, just tying up a few loose ends. Then she looked at me and said, I think it is time. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the houses and the sprinklers hissed across perfectly compliant lawns, 2 things happened. First, Lena's team group chat lit up. Second, a mysterious envelope was slid under our door. It had no name, just one phrase printed in block letters. We know what she is doing. I picked it up, looked at Lena, and raised an eyebrow. She did not look concerned. If anything, she looked intrigued. Then she said something I will never forget. They are trying to warn us, but they do not realize I am not the one who should be scared. It started like any other casual suburban celebration. We were planning a 4th of July barbecue, not for fireworks, not for patriotism, but because everyone was on edge, and nothing calms the nerves like grilled meat and beer. We invited the usual suspects, a few cool neighbors, the elderly couple next door, even Jim from across the street with the world's most fragile classic Mustang. Lena had a look in her eyes that morning, part relaxation, part anticipation, like someone watching a chessboard where all the pieces had been moved exactly where she wanted them. I did not ask questions, I just marinated the chicken. By noon, the scent of charcoal and garlic was floating down the block. Kids were riding bikes, someone had patriotic music playing a little too loud, and our backyard looked like a commercial for calm, happy community life. You would never guess that just 24 Hours earlier, Lena had received an anonymous envelope with the words, "We know what she is doing," and had not blinked. She had added it to the file like it was a coupon flyer. It was around 3 p.m. when I saw them. 3 of the HOA's so-called civil enforcement officers walking down the sidewalk like they were on patrol in a danger zone. Same black polos, same cargo pants, utility belts, bulging with whatever fake authority they thought they needed. One had a handheld radio clutched in his hand like it might explode if he let go. I watched them pause at the corner, glance toward our house, and mutter into the radio like this was an operation and not just a cookout in someone's backyard. Lena saw them too. She did not react. She was setting out plates with casual precision like she was not 2 steps ahead of them already. She did not even look at the Jeep which she had parked on the street in full glorious view. It gleamed in the sun like it had been waxed with pure defiance. I had half expected her to move it, maybe tuck it out of sight, but she parked it right in front of the HOA sign that read aesthetic, "Compliance is a civic duty." And then she set a small American flag in the windshield. The 3 HOA officers approached like they were about to stage a drug bust. One began recording on his phone, another flipped open a citation book. The third, shorter and stockier, wore mirrored sunglasses and a scowl that seemed permanently attached to his face. He stepped forward and cleared his throat like a high school principal about to deliver a suspension. "This vehicle is in direct violation of Greenbrier Regulation 14.2.5, he announced to no one in particular. Lena, who had just handed a juice box to one of the neighbor kids, turned slowly. She looked at the Jeep, then back at him, then said in the calmest voice imaginable, "Which part, the freedom or the horsepower?" He did not like that. His mouth twitched. The other 2 officers stepped up like backup singers ready for a fight. I noticed a couple of our guests shift awkwardly. Jim stopped flipping burgers and whispered to me, "They're really doing this at a barbecue." Apparently, yes, they really were. Sunglasses guy reached into his vest and pulled out a laminated warning card, holding it up like a warrant. "This is your final notification. Failure to relocate this non-compliant vehicle will result in forced removal by the authority granted to the Greenbrier HLA board and its appointed civil enforcement task force." Someone from the back coughed and muttered, "Who appointed you?" "The fashion police." Lena smiled, not wide, not mocking, just a small, infuriating smile that said, "I have seen warlords more intimidating than you." Then she stepped in front of the Jeep, arms casually crossed. "You want to move it, you will have to go through me." There was a beat, a very long, very quiet beat. The officer with the citation pad looked uncomfortable. The one filming started to lower his phone, but sunglasses guy, he doubled down. His hand hovered over his belt where a taser was clipped. "You are interfering with a lawful citation process," he said, stepping forward. "Step aside, or we will use non-lethal force to neutralize the threat to community order." At that point, even the wind stopped. I could feel everyone around us go tense, waiting to see if this idiot was really going to try it again. Lena did not move, not an inch. She did not even raise an eyebrow, just kept looking at him like she was watching a pigeon trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. Then a voice crackled over the radio. I could not hear it clearly, but it made the guy with the radio frown and stepped back. Sunglasses guy did not wait. With a sudden jerk, he reached for the taser, pulled it free, and pointed it directly at my wife. Now, you might think this would be the moment where someone yells, "Stop," or "This is insane." But no one had time. Before I could take a step forward, before even Lena could speak, the taser fired, and Lena dropped. Gasp, shouts, someone dropped a plate. I dropped my beer. But then the real show began. Because as sunglasses guy stood there stunned at his own action, something shifted. I saw a flicker of red light on his vest, then another, then a third. Lasers, not from toys, not from party decorations. These were military, sharp, precise, controlled, and they were coming from everywhere. From the hedges from a second-story window across the street from behind the corner fence, one by one Lena's old team emerged. Not charging, not shouting, just appearing like smoke. Calm, confident, professional, each one armed, each one silent. I counted 4, maybe 5. They were all staring down the HOA officers like predators watching a confused deer stumble into a trap. Sunglasses guy froze. The other 2 took a cautious step back. No one moved, not even the kids who were now clinging to their parents like they had just stepped into a live-action thriller. And then Lena rolled over. Not struggling, not confused, she rolled over, pushed herself up on one arm and said, "You need to recalibrate your aim." That shot was low and left. The collective sound of half the neighborhood's jaws hitting the grass was almost comical. She stood up, brushed off her pants, and looked at the taser wires dangling from her shirt. Then she yanked them out like someone removing loose threads. I watched Sunglasses guy drop the taser. Not on purpose, his hand just stopped working. His knees bent slightly like his body was trying to escape without his brain's consent. Lena walked up to him, slow and deliberate. "You just tossed a federal asset," she said, voice quiet but steady. "Do you know how many laws you broke? Do you even know the difference between a civilian enforcement rule and an actual statute?" He did not answer. He could not. And then one of her team members stepped forward, handed her a folder, and said, "Everything's ready." Lena nodded, flipped it open, and smiled. That is when I realized this barbecue was not a celebration. It was a setup, and we were not the ones being watched anymore. They were. For a moment, nobody moved. The neighborhood was frozen like a paused movie. The fake taser cop still had his hands slightly up, sweat visibly forming on his forehead, pupils darting from Lena to the shadows, where reds danced across his chest. Karen was nowhere in sight. Of course, the self-declared Queen of Greenbrier had for once missed a chance to be present at a disaster she helped engineer. Or maybe she knew something was coming and decided to let one of her disposable henchmen take the fall. Either way, the mood had shifted. You could feel it in the air. Something was about to break. And this time, it was not Lena who was going to take the hit. Lena stood in the center of the chaos, entirely in control. She was not gloating, was not yelling, was not threatening, just calm. Her hands flipped through the folder her teammate had given her like she was reading out the lunch special. Then she turned to the crowd, which now included most of the block, and lifted her voice just enough to carry. "In case you're wondering," she said, "everything you have seen today has been documented. Body cams, drones, witness statements, it is all here." She tapped the folder once, and it has already been submitted. The taser cop finally spoke, but it came out more like a crop. "Submitted to who?" Lena glanced at him, then tilted her head slightly toward a man who had just stepped onto the curb behind her, tall, suited, holding an ID badge already flipped open. "To him," she said, "and a dozen others like him." The man gave a small nod and stepped forward. "Agent Walker," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Department of Justice, Office of Civil Enforcement. We have been monitoring Greenbrier's HOA since February. Today's events confirmed enough violations to proceed." You could feel the ripple in the crowd, like someone had dropped a rock in a still pond. Whispers started up immediately. People turned to each other, eyes wide, some covering their mouths, like they had just witnessed a political scandal unfold live on their sidewalk, because they had Lena's old team fanned out, not to intimidate but to control the scene. They guided people back gently, spoke softly to the more stunned guests, and kept an eye on the few HOA enforcers who had started backing away like they might bolt. None of them did, probably because even they realized by now that Lena had been holding every card in the deck and was only just now laying them down. Agent Walker motioned for 2 uniformed officers to step forward from an unmarked car down the street. They were not local police, they were federal, quiet, efficient, and very not here for games. They collected the taser, took statements, and read off legal jargon like it was bedtime poetry. Sunglasses Guy did not say a word as he was cuffed. One of his teammates, the guy who had been filming earlier, tried to object. He was immediately reminded that impersonating law enforcement carried a hefty penalty and that resisting would only add more years to the sentence. He shut up. Karanet finally showed up 15 minutes later, flanked by two HOA board members who looked like they had aged a decade since the start of the barbecue. She strutted and like nothing had happened, jaw set, arms folded, trying to project power that no longer existed. She opened her mouth to speak, but Agent Walker held up a hand. "Ma'am, you are the acting president of this HOA, correct?" "I am," she said, lifting her chin as if that carried legal weight. "Then you are responsible for authorizing the creation of the Civil Enforcement Task Force." "Yes, and let me just say then you are also responsible for their actions, their training, and their weapons. You will need to come with us for questioning." She laughed, actually laughed. "Questioning for what? This is a private association matter. You have no jurisdiction." Walker did not blink. "Actually, we do. Your HOA has been operating under an expired charter for the past 16 months. You have issued over 200 unlawful citations, collected nearly $100,000 in fines, and created a paramilitary group without any legal oversight. That is not an association matter. That is a federal one." Karanet turned pale. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish suddenly yanked from water. Her board members stepped back. One of them looked like he might faint. Lena handed Walker another document. This includes digital records, emails, meeting notes, several instances where they discussed bypassing the original bylaws to push through punitive regulations. Walker took it, nodded once, and turned back to Karanet. "Ma'am, you are officially under investigation for fraud, harassment, abuse of authority, and potential RICO violations." "RICO?" someone in the crowd whispered. "Is not that for mobsters?" "Yes," I said out loud. "Yes, it is." Karanet was escorted to the same unmarked car, her pastel cardigan flapping in the wind like a surrender flag. She did not look back. I did not expect her to. Over the next hour, the backyard slowly emptied out. People trickled away, murmuring about what they had seen, what it meant, and what came next. Lena and her team remained behind, speaking quietly with the agents and helping organize the evidence. At one point, I looked over and saw Jim from across the street holding back tears as he thanked her. Apparently, the HLA had threatened to demolish his carport last month for being visually disruptive. He thought he would have to sell the Mustang to pay the fine. By dusk, the neighborhood was quiet again. The agents were gone, the vehicles had vanished. The only thing left behind was the smell of barbecue, some scattered paper plates, and a deep, satisfying silence. A week later, Greenbrier's HOA was officially dissolved. Without a valid charter, all their policies collapsed. Their fines were nullified. Their records were seized. The so-called task force was banned from participating in any organized community leadership. Lena did not gloat. She did not throw a victory party. She just cleaned up her files, deleted the team group chat, and returned to her normal jogs like nothing had happened. But the board was not empty for long. At the next community meeting, an emergency gathering to establish temporary leadership, someone nominated Lena for HOA president. She did not campaign, did not hand out flyers or shake hands. She simply accepted with a slight shrug and a polite smile. Her first act as president, she shredded the rule book. Her second, she issued a new rule. No member of the board would ever again be allowed to issue citations, fines, or patrol anything in a vest. The community would function on respect, transparency, and trust, or not at all. She handed me the gavel at the end of that meeting and whispered, "It is not revenge, it is reconstruction." I believed her, mostly. And just before we left, she looked out over the quiet crowd and said, "Oh, and by the way, if anyone sees a clipboard with the words Civil Enforcement Division on a go-ahead and toss it in the nearest fire pit. Everyone laughed loud, relieved and real, because Greenbrier was finally free. And Lena, she was not just my wife. She was the ghost of every tyrant's downfall. Calm, tactical, patient, and when push came to Taser, she did not push back.